Runways at night, truth by noon. My name is Nate and I keep the edges of the night where airplanes can see them. I'm a runway lighting technician at a mid-size airport, the kind with a single long strip that believes it's a paragraph, and a shorter one that likes to be a parenthesis. On paper, my job is CCR loads and frangible mounts. In practice, it's persuasion. Constant current regulators have personalities you ignore at your peril. So do pilots. I carry a headlamp that makes me look braver than I feel, a multimeter that forgets nothing, a notebook that smells faintly of de-icer, and a screwdriver my father insisted wasn't lucky and then used only on Thursdays. I live with Jamie. He blows glass, bowls that look like whether you can hold, vases that have to be explained to themselves. He comes home with a constellation of silica on his forearms and a furnace heat that follows him like a rumor. Our apartment faces the estuary where barges do their patient arithmetic. On the fridge, we keep a magnetized notepad titled Say in Daylight, because we promised not to invent truths after midnight. Some mornings, the magnet is the only thing in the kitchen doing its job. The Tuesday my instruments were fine and I was not. I was on the service road by runway 14, the sky the exact gray a promise uses when it needs time. We had a PAPI out, one of the red-white boxes that argue about glide path with an entire airplane, and I was verifying the angle after a lamp change. My inclinometer agreed with my stomach. I wrote PAPI good on the work order, took a picture of my boots and the horizon for no reason at all, and pulled out my phone to text Jamie that the wind was pretending to be persuasive. That's when the joint email we use for deliveries blinked across the lock screen. Thank you for your stay, Harbor Crown Hotel. Time, 12:083:02. Points, 200 added. I didn't call. Our rule for anything that isn't yet a disaster is 2 loops around the block before nomming it. My block was the perimeter road itself, littered with the gravel of other people's mornings. I walked it twice. A jet rolled past and the winglets flexed as if stretching a truth. The only sentence wind knows came and went. You already know. Jamie came home smelling like the last 3 minutes of a kiln cycle, like oranges that had seen the sun from the inside. He set his blowpipe, wrapped, reverent, on the counter as if our counter were a safe place for heat, kissed the air, then my cheek, then the scar on my thumb from a frangible that wasn't, and saw the notepad turn to blank. I held out my phone like a glass of water I wasn't sure he wanted. He didn't improvise confusion. Yes, he said, resting his palm on the back of a chair the way glassworkers test honesty before gravity. The cold shop was jammed. The gallery moved the viewing earlier. The manager, who lives on adjacencies, suggested a daytime room at the Harbor Crown. I went, with Victor. Victor photographs glass the way cartographers map rivers, for where the light went as much as where the object is. Jamie admires him in public, which is both healthy and inconvenient. We worked, he said. It felt good to feel possible under a ceiling I didn't coax into kindness. There are currents you respect because they're not yours. We need a clear table, I said. Tonight, no phones, no tongs disguised as metaphors. I have a habit. I turn fear into furniture. I dragged the task lamp from the desk to the small oak table by the window, laid a square of plexiglass on top, slid a short string of battery lights underneath that refused to take sides, and taped a clean sheet of paper over the glow. I wrote with a black marker, clear table, one truth, one want, no asterisks. Jamie set both palms down. His hands always look like they survived the right fire. My truth, he said, voice like glass cooling, is I liked being looked at like I was still becoming. My truth, I said, choosing verbs the way I choose torque, is I'm not afraid you slept with him. I'm afraid you'll write the final label somewhere I can't read it. My want. To want you now, not the museum version of later. My truth, he said, is I want to be seen when I'm still gather and guesswork, not just when the annealer forgives. My want, that you want me halfway, fingerprints and all. We added a rule to the fridge, 1 hour without screens each night and a post-it on the table before we brushed our teeth. The first week was a row of modest sentences, kiss me without captions, say no without an artist's statement. Hotel emails stop at the door, and then the hotel wrote again, double points all month. Marketing is a metronome that loves its own counting. I hid in work. Before sunrise, I joined the FOD walk, foreign object debris, shoulder to shoulder across the runway like a prayer line. We picked up bolts that had decided to be interesting, plastic that thought it could fly, a spoon that didn't know what it was doing there. I swapped out an edge light that kept trying to be moody, reseated a cable at the sign for taxiway B that wanted to blink like gossip, and talked a constant current regulator into remembering it was an adult. Between tasks, I wrote on a scrap, remember water, not the kind we squeegee off the slab, the kind you drink when grief makes your mouth loud. That night on the table, Jamie wrote, I want to be able to tell you when I like something that isn't you. I wrote, I want to offer more than reprimands. Smaller, more than apologies. Days pretended to be cooperative. A kid in a yellow vest on a school tour asked if runways ever sleep. I said we teach them to blink instead. A tug driver waved me across a taxiway like we'd been neighbors once in another city. A gull stood on an impavement light and looked pleased with its footing. After shift, I came home to find Jamie tapping gray paper to a wall like he was auditioning better weather. Sunday, he said, let's take the early harbor ferry and get off at the outer beach. Arbitrary day, late return. I said yes the way you say yes to a planned outage, with gratitude for a controlled darkness. We went, 2 hours of noise that belonged to no one. On the beach I thought low visibility procedures, laughed at myself and let my instruments be wrong. We ate a sandwich that used more salt than mercy, then another humbler. Back home he wrote, I want to be there when you congratulate yourself. I wrote, I want to congratulate you without checking the lever positions first. It felt like both a joke and a maintenance note. The magazine that hires him offered a 3-day micro-residency in a concrete studio that pretended to be warm, hotel included. I want to go for the work, not the soap, he said. I also want to prove I know how to come back. We wrote a protocol, nightly voice memo, morning I'm here, no poetry. He left with a reasonable backpack, a shirt I forgive the world for, and a single-serve citrus soap whose label was nicer than it meant. I lived like a runway after hail, orderly, alert, one bad idea from a closure. The second night I drove to the far pier where the old pianist plays slow tangos in a room with more windows than audience. He leaves a breath hanging at the end of each phrase, as if offering the next thing a better chance. I applauded and tipped and felt like a seal cut and replaced properly. Voice memo 1. The room doesn't smell like anything, it's almost sad. Voice memo 2. I'm here, and a blurry wall that breathed better than we had. Voice memo 3 didn't come for hours. I rearranged the apartment like I was looking for a frequency. Jealousy has the mechanics of a stuck latch. Then a text. I'm making my no. I told them I have someone. I said I'm not interested in being profitable for anything else. He came back. He set the melon-scented soap on the console. Drawer for things we laugh about without getting hurt, I asked. Drawer, he said. On the table he wrote, let's learn something useless together. We tried whistling in 2 parts. Catastrophe first, then a narrow miracle. 30 seconds of overlap without envy. 2 lines agreeing to carry the same current for a difficult inch. I don't want to be heroic. I want to be exact. Some evenings I open the archived hotel email the way you tongue a repaired tooth. Some mornings Jamie comes home with a light I don't recognize. I can see the day tuned his frequencies. We sit. We talk low. We let our hands do nothing. Sometimes the table looks like a bric-a-brac held together by tape. Sometimes a music stand waiting for breath. Yesterday, a developer with a blazer, the color of wet concrete, suggested our field crews hold openings 5 minutes longer to improve vehicular throughput. He said throughput like he was apologizing to a spreadsheet. I told him the FAA and the river and my grandmother's barometer all had opinions. He smiled and tried a different noun. I watched a couple on the tram argue by texting, faces calm, thumbs shouting. On our block, an old man asked if the lift bridge was safe. "Better today than yesterday," I said. "I'll keep it that way." He nodded like I'd handed him a handrail. On my way home, I texted Jamie, "I don't want all your notes so I can own them. I want to know them so I can recognize them." He replied, "Then look. The right way to tell a man whose hands are a language that you're listening." I ducked into a hardware store that smelled like competence and bought a strip of small blank tags. This morning the hotel tried again, last chance to double your points. I clicked change address and typed hours, domestic insolence. I taped 3 tags along the bottom edge of the table and wrote on them in block letters, ME, US, today. Jamie put his hand flat on the paper. "One truth, one want, no asterisks," he said. My truth, I still want to be looked at like I'm a draft. My want, that you look at me like I'm always becoming. My truth, I said, is that I'm afraid of silence but less than yesterday. My want, to kiss you now, even if our hands smell like shellac and electricity. Later on shift, a pilot called tower about a faint flicker on the center line during rollout. I drove out with flashers on, kneeled on hot pavement, and found a connector that thought it was a story. I crimped it into honesty. On the way back, a tug waited at the hold line, a nose of metal being gracious to a nose of light. And for a second, the strip of the runway looked less like a road and more like a promise stretched thin and kept anyway. When I came home that evening, the notepad on the fridge had 2 new lines in Jamie's handwriting. "Say the hard thing before the hard thing says you, and keep the shoreline where you can see it." The little lights under the plexi flickered once, as if approving. A freight eased past the cut without making the pigeons do anything they didn't want to. Somewhere a substation hummed its old yes-no and meant both. The tide shouldered the ferry into the slip like a kind set of hands. And the switches of the city, if you'll believe me, decided for one night only to line themselves without complaint.